Hello, I'm Kate McKay, and welcome back to Survive to Thrive. Today, I'll be interviewing Aaron Griffin, and I'm very excited about meeting Aaron and speaking to him on this podcast today. So I'm going to read, as I always do, putting on my glasses because I'm old, and reading his bio. Aaron Griffin is an entrepreneur, author of the soon-to-be-released title, Get After It, How the Young Professional Becomes the High Performer. Oh, so awesome. And host of the podcast, Get After It. Aaron left university at 19 to scale what became a multi-million-dollar division of a company called Student Painters by age 21. An avid reader and self-proclaimed people enthusiast, and yes, he is, Aaron grew up in the Midwest and currently resides in San Diego, California. Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks so much for having me on, Kate.
What up, buddy?
I'm just enjoying the beautiful San Diego weather that we have here.
I know.
It's a little cold and we're all stuck inside, but we're thriving. We got some sunshine, so it's good.
Yeah, we do. Even in the East Coast, we do. So here we are, a couple of Midwesterners. Did I ever tell you I was originally from Chicago, from Illinois?
No, I didn't remember that.
Couple of Midwesterners.
Well, and it's funny because we got connected 4 days before I left Massachusetts, because I lived in Massachusetts for 2 years.
Right.
Now you're in Massachusetts, and then we got connected 4 days before I was leaving at Chandler's event down in Austin.
So viewers out there, that I met Aaron, another amazing person from Author Advantage Accelerator, this really wonderful, small little exclusive little group of powerful people, all part of self-publishing school. So it's how I wrote and got Claim Your Inner Badass to bestseller, and how Aaron is going to take his book to bestseller. So Aaron, I'm super excited. The first time we met was sitting at a luncheon, and we just hit it off completely. And I'm completely inspired by your enthusiasm for living, and I'm really looking forward to digging into some stuff today.
Let's do it. I'm pumped.
Ready? All right, so we talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to bring this up for the viewers. I am so interested, and in fact, a fair amount of my coaching clients are younger people. I just dig younger people. You know, I love your inspiration and your enthusiasm. And I want you to dig in a little bit about how you decided that college wasn't your fit, because for my generation, for me in particular, Aaron, college was my ticket out. In a big way. So I was shipped off to private high school, one of 9 children, and I was sent off to private school, and I received a full scholarship at Bennington College on my gumption, right? Because I was like the token poor kid. And college for me changed my life, right? Yeah. And so now your new generation, and particularly now with this crisis that we're going through, what is the worth of a college education? And how did you decide to bootstrap yourself out of college, probably to your parents' horror, and decide to launch into a business as an entrepreneur, really?
Yeah. So I'm blessed with amazing parents. That's definitely the first thing. I have just when you thought I'd put them through another crazy thing I'm doing, and then hey, I'm leaving school. And by the way, I'm going to move 1,000 miles away from here in a month. So that was a great conversation. How do I start with this? So my relationship with college in general, it's weird. It was expected I would go to school when I was growing up, but I came from a very much working class family. My parents were both entrepreneurs. My father grew up in Detroit. He used to play hockey growing up in the 60s, and it was he played ice hockey before it was really inexpensive to actually play ice hockey. So he used to tell me stories of driving across the bridge into Canada at like 3 o'clock in the morning for cheap ice time. Right. Wow. And he eventually hurt himself. He was trying to get to the NHL, and he hurt himself. And eventually he ended up really I think he was trying to kind of search for what he wanted to do. At that time, I think it was really popular to work in the automotive factories in Detroit. And I don't think he just didn't want to do that. He ended up starting a pizzeria when he was a couple of years ago, my age, 20 years old. And he's now been at that for 42 years. So my relationship with entrepreneurship and just life in general came up from my parents, obviously. And I started working for him when I was 13, I want to say, for $5 an hour cash. It was like the best gig in the world. They used to bring me in with them on the Saturday shift. And that's how I got my feet in the pizzeria. And what's ironic is when I worked with my dad, I thought entrepreneurship was like the worst thing ever. I couldn't imagine a worse gig, because if somebody called off on a Friday night or something, you know, my dad is the guy ultimately responsible for that shift. You know, worst case,
Right.
he's got to go in and cover the shift. And I just thought,
What did that represent to you? Like lack of freedom, or
oh,
how,
totally,
what was
totally.
the negatives?
In my 16-year-old brain,
Yeah.
it just struck me as just something I would never want to do. I was like, I want to get the 9 to 5. I want to be
Mhm.
maybe politics someday. I was like, my route was, I knew I was going to go to college, and it was like, I'll just go study business, do something with that, and then eventually pivot to politics or something like that,
Right.
which is odd because that is certainly one part of my perspective that's changed the most in the last 5 years. But when I went to school initially, I mean, I had a blast at Michigan State University. So I went to Michigan State University, go green, and I spent 2 years there. After my first year, I got involved with, or during my first year, towards the end of my first year, I got involved with a company called Student Painters. And what Student Painters does, and they work with the young entrepreneurs across America, they invest in young college students to start their own business. And what they do is they provide the training, the upfront capital, and then really it's up to you to actually go do and put in the effort. I'm actually stoked. I'm going to be jumping on a meeting with them a little later today to talk about how they're handling this whole crisis. But I
Wow.
ended up working with them for 4 years. My first 2 years, I was in Michigan. The second two, I got out to Massachusetts. So the way I got to Massachusetts really answers your question with how I feel with university. I got stuck between kind of a rock and a hard place where I did really poorly in one class that was essential to getting into the business college, and I didn't realize it at the moment. In fact, I did poor enough or good enough to pass the class where Michigan State wouldn't let me retake it. And because I did poor in this core class, it was a penalty that I just could not overcome on the business school
Oh,
application.
right.
So my route to leaving college was I never anticipated it. But what happened was I was facing a decision where I couldn't get into the business college. So now it was, okay, I got to pivot and pick another degree.
Mm.
I couldn't find anything I was passionate about. So I actually just put it on the back burner. I was like, I'll keep working on my gen eds. But I loved what I was doing with Student Painters because not only was I bootstrapping my own business from the ground and then splitting profits with the company because they invested in me, but then I was also able to coach some other high performing entrepreneurs. And it was just fun. I realized I was learning.
At what age?
18.
Yeah, that's what I'm
So
saying, right? So that is super inspirational. So, you know, what I want to say to the viewers is like, come on, what are you, 22 now, right?
yes.
Yeah. So you're never too young, or look at me on the other spectrum, too old to reinvent yourself. And that's really something that we want to focus on now too, is obviously the whole pivot, but really what it means to reframe and reinvent yourself. And this current crisis that we're going on into right now, certainly the viral element of it. However, the economic element is something, just because I love business and I'm super interested in trends and how business births and the parallel between our own personal development and our professional development. And each organization has a personality, right? It's their mission statement.
Right.
So I think that's important. Like, how are we reframing right now and reinventing ourselves? And you and I were talking about this too. How can we reframe what layoff is? Because unfortunately today, you know, I had two people, both one of my dearest friends and also the woman that's staying with me because she had to bail out of New York because of the, you know, the viral explosion there. There's a potential for two people that I know dear that are holding their breath, waiting to get laid off.
Right.
So how can we frame that? Obviously, the economic impulse, the influence of what's going to happen is huge. I'm not making light of this at all.
Sure.
Massive loss for many people. But what are ways that we can possibly reframe that? And you mentioned like double downing and reinvention and reframing. What is your thoughts on that?
Let me start with in my opinion, where it starts with the leadership. So my experience with hiring people, then obviously having to let people go. It's a two-way street. It's not, you can't do one without the other. My first year running a painting business, I was a horrifyingly poor leader, right? And that's not shocking. I had never been in a position where I was actually liable for everybody on the team and making sure that I did a good job. And what I found was it took me months after to reflect on this and really determine what it was. But at the end of the day, I just took a lack of accountability as a leader. And I also just expected respect from people. And that's what ultimately led to me having to let go my first team, because even though they didn't want to, quote unquote, leave, like I was in a situation where half of my team had quit. And the rest of the team that was left, I had a decision. I was either going to keep them, and I was in the middle of a project. It would have been very convenient to keep them, except the long-term health of my business was going to be decided by them as opposed to myself. If I let them go, now I have a chance to reset expectations. I have a chance to reset everything. And all I'm betting on is my ability to get more people there. Because at the end of the day, I know I can train somebody, I can show them how to do the job, and I'm going to learn and be better as a leader. So that was my first
relationship. Tell me, what is it? Just if you don't mind, just letting me know briefly, what did you learn? Because obviously, like through everything that we go through, whether it's in an intimate relationship, a personal relation, whatever, in a failed business, like I've had a couple. So what was the lesson in that for you? What's the nougat in that?
Jeez. Oh, well, with hiring, what it came down to for me, it was a failure of my own self to tell somebody what they were doing poorly at. And this came up as I expanded my team over the next year, and I brought on more people and had to let go a couple of people. It is a skill like anything else to be able to do it in a way that achieves its objective. So the objective when you let somebody go is twofold. One, in your team and your company, you're taking it as an opportunity to either reset expectations for that position because the previous holder of that office or whatever it wasn't meeting the demands of the business.
Sure.
So what you're doing is you're opening that up to re-justify the expectations and bring in somebody else who's going to be in a better fit, or reprogramming resources of a company to somewhere else and streamlining that position to something else. You're changing the company in some way, shape, or form, which is the obligation of leadership. If something's not working, you got to reorganize it and adjust. On the flip side, if you're the team member, somebody who just got let go, I'm in a tough spot because I've never been personally let go. I've never been fired. I worked for my father growing up. And then eventually I did a great job at student parents. I was never in a position to potentially get let go. But what I can tell from some of my colleagues who have been let go, or somebody who I had let go myself, it really is the most cliche line. I've heard this 1,000 times, but you are opening up that person to go achieve what they're actually meant to do.
Yes. So how did that let you, so let me go back to that. So your lesson was that if you let those people go, you were giving them freedom and also you freedom to reinvent yourself.
You know what? We have there's a lot of crazy stuff happening with the coronavirus right now, right? We happen to be recording during this time. What's happening right now in the workplace is everybody's trying to figure out how to become more efficient. They're trying to be lean. They're trying to move. They're trying to be as productive as possible. So when it comes down to employment, you have to redirect your resources to wherever is going to be the most productive in the economy. So as a worker, as somebody who has a skill or trade to offer, the question to ask yourself is, how do I redeploy myself to be the most productive I can? Because we have an obligation to be able to earn a good living, to be able to earn as much money as we can in an economy. So what you have to look at is, with everything that's shifting, everything that's changing, obviously probably not, quote unquote, a great time to get into the job market right now, but that's also not really true. There's just different avenues in which you can get into the job market. And at the end of the day, a belief that you are dependent on the job market or any other businesses it's false. You as an individual bring value. It's up to you to determine where your value is. So then you can market yourself effectively to teams. At the end of the day, like, you should be looking for a specific position that you think you're going to do best in, as opposed to going to a large or just one organization trying to figure it out. Unless maybe you're right out of school and you want to figure some things out. But if you know your skills, you couldn't be more powerful in the marketplace. And if you get let go, that's perfect. Now you can reflect on what you did wrong, why you weren't a fit for that organization, and what organization you would be a good fit for.
Or what is now the organization that you need to create. So talk to me a little bit about redeployment, because I like that. So let's use that military term. So when we redeploy and fear is in the way, how do we meet and greet the fear and move forward to reevaluate and rebirth a new idea or a new you? In many ways, this is a ground zero, and we're all in reinvention mode. Certainly this birth of this podcast And
Yeah.
your businesses that you're launching are rebirthed through this. But what would you want the viewers to know? Your age, my age, male, female, whatever. How do we move through fear to redeploy? Through redeployment.
Well, so fear and redeploy. What ultimately is any new opportunity came from some kind of rejection.
Amen.
Even if you're let go, it's not like, oh, you just got turned down on a date. It's actually worse than that, right? Like the
Or
relationship.
maybe not. Maybe not.
Hey, it could be that way. And well, either way, my point is actually it all filters back to the exact same thing. It's rejection. You're no longer the right fit for whatever it is. You're no longer the best peg in the machine for that thing to work. So with rejection, I talked about this concept in my book. What I think would be the biggest thing you would have to look at is, I think the difference between high performers and people who really move and shake in the economy versus somebody who kind of drifts through, it's not that they're any different as a human being. We're all human beings. The difference between those two individuals, the average performer and the high performer, is the high performer looks at their failures. They look at their rejections, and it's not something that defines them. It's something that guides them. It's something that they learn from, that they can look at it. And it's tough to answer you have to look at every specific example you're in front of and say, what can you make the most out of this? Because at the end of the day, the other side of this is letting your failures define you. And I love this. And this just made me, your question made me think of this when our conference that we met at, they had the concept called the 5-minute rule. If it's not going to affect you in 5 years, don't allow yourself to fret on it for more than 5 minutes. And the reason that's so valuable and so important is we're human beings. We tend to overcomplicate things. When you can pull the emotion out of a decision, it usually becomes a lot more clear. And at the end of the day, the decision-making process that I've used for everything since I was 18 was looking at whatever 2 avenues I'm looking at and what's the ceiling and floor of both of those decisions. Where could the ceiling be for this one? Yeah. Where is the ceiling for this one? How bad is the risk in the floor? How bad is the risk in the floor on both of them? And when I say the floor, at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen is essentially I'm asking myself, what am I going to learn if I absolutely drop the ball and fail like crazy?
It's the best. Well, I love it. Like, in particularly though, where people I think get caught up though when we talk about fear, and you just clearly have a really you are very evolved for your age. Now I'm not saying that to be, but you are. Like the pragmatism that you go and in your approach, these are all like yummy tidbits that you're providing. So fear is often from things that we imagine or that, that we imagine could be. And oftentimes fear is triggered from previous rejection, not just even that one rejection, but rejections of a lifetime.
Well, so, So, you know what? Your brain is scanning I think it's half a second. Your brain is scanning like 30 times your surroundings, right? It's trying to piece together and it's trying to predict what's going to happen. What fear comes from is when we can no longer predict what's going to happen. So that's where like a loss of a job, it's not so much the loss of your passion or the hours that you're putting in there every week, which really should be more important. This is the thing you're spending all of your life at. You're spending 2/5 of your total hours of your life at.
Right.
But we boil it down to, oh my goodness, what am I going to do without 3 weeks of a paycheck? Which is a practical question.
Sure.
But all that is the brain scanning and saying, I'm going to run out of money in X days, which is a perfectly good thing to fear, but it's actually an opportunity. Now it's like, okay, well, this is the game. How do we now extend our lines to that point?
So it's like question, Aaron, then would you, from that place of pivot, what would be questions that you would recommend the viewers or listeners use? So if we're in that, okay, we're in the fear mode, where is the pivot to reinvention?
Okay. The pivot to reinvention. It's interesting because I think it's driven by everyone's personal experience in terms of what you're going through is going to be dramatically brought. It's going to be brought in and internalized in terms of how dramatic it's going to be on your level. So when we look at fear, when we look at the level of uncertainty in a time like right now, we ask ourselves, okay, well, how do you pick yourself up and start moving from there? How do you do X, Y, and Z? The first thing that you really have to do, and we just alluded to this, in my opinion, is remove the emotions from it. You understand the obligations that you have to your family, your kids, potentially if you're young like myself, maybe you don't have a child or something like that, but you have these obligations like rent and other expenses and student loans. You have to prioritize what your actual obligations are and separate the emotions from those obligations. You have to look at this almost like, look, you're going into battle with the resources you have. Your emotions are entirely tied to, oh, I wish I had X machine or X aircraft carrier or X, other, deployment resource that you don't have. So there's no point in actually looking at what you could have or would have. You're working with what you have. So you have to be a pragmatist in whatever it is that you're doing. And I love, it's like what my dad would always say. He's like, at the end of the day, if you're in a really rough spot financially and you're working a 40-hour week job, 50-hour week job, you have no reason to not be delivering pizzas on the weekend or whatever it is. You got to be able to pragmatize and say, we need more money in this equation or whatever that solution may be.
I love it that you're bringing up your dad, but I remember my dad, I would be like talking to him about something at work, because my dad was basically a lobbyist for low-income housing. He was very passionate about his work. And of course I am too, but he was also, he was my coach, legit, the best coach, particularly at the end of his life. But he said to me, I'd be like, Dad, blah, 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 blah. And he'd go, Katie, take the romance out of the job.
Yeah.
Take the romance out of the job. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. We can fuel, and I love it. And I actually wrote down the steps that you just talked about. Understanding, and I'm going to actually write these out so that we can add them in the show notes. But I love that idea. And use your emotion as fuel to to live in pragmatic decision making. Particularly.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And we're gonna go into this, but there's gonna be so much change in the coming 6 months, because the reality is, and it looks like we're recording this on a day yesterday, it looks like we might be reaching the apex of this crazy thing that's happening, or we may not. Either way, there's so many changes coming to the market, and everything that's happening, that's from the government bailouts to even just individual suffering in this. There's going to be change. Like, you can't have a life devoid of change. You're not going to have it. Even if everything was perfect right now, everything is going to change. So you have to separate that emotion. You have to look at what is in front of you and just make decisions and move.
Right. It's so true. I love it. Okay. So for you personally, I'm just going to ask you a couple personal questions, if you don't mind. Have you always been so positive?
Well,
because you're like a super loving guy, and you're like super positive, and you're this big man.
Yeah.
And you have like an exuding from you, which is just like, oh yeah, Planet Fitness. It's a great place to park your car when you're like nomading.
Right.
You live a life with so much freaking courage of like, it's all gonna work out. Oh, Paris, right? You just came back.
Yeah, right.
Talk to me about your courage.
One of the great things, I found a lot of success when I was leading a division of that prior company. And that's what people see is the success, right? There's so many moments where, and I talk about this in my book. I mean, there are points where I'm in a position of like, I just think I'm going to absolutely fail. I don't even know how I'm going to dig ourselves out of this. And as the leader of the team, it's like, as a leader, you feel responsible for everything because you are ultimately. And I guess for me, I've reached the point now, I'd like to think this, because I really reached, it's like, I just don't care. You make a decision to be positive or negative about things. Why would you choose to be negative at the end of the day? And what I get more blunt on this, because look, that's very simple. I look at it like this. I make fun of myself in my book for something that everyone used to make fun of me about in my previous company. I coached entrepreneurs, and when they would call me with their greatest challenges that they're facing, which, don't get me wrong, they're facing real challenges. This is the reason people did this internship with us, was they wanted to real life. Oh my gosh, I got to fire somebody. Oh my gosh, everyone just quit on me. Right. I would get these phone calls that are just disastrous calls. Right. Then they're rough. They're going to ruin that branch manager's day. It's awful. I was relentlessly known for laughing at people and having some fun with it, because I would be like, oh, that's fantastic. Everybody just quit. Oh, perfect. Great. And the reason I did that was because we all get caught up in the moment so much, when the reality is these horrific moments that we never anticipate, that are rocking our world, they're clearly something that we can recover from, but we're questioning if we can in the moment. This is what we live for. This is what we're going to learn from at the end of the day. So when somebody's reflecting back on that process, what good am I going to be to worry about the problem like everybody else? I know they're going to get through the problem.
Right.
So I'd rather be the optimistic side that reminds them, hey, this is the reason why you're going out there and challenging yourself in the first place.
Right.
You don't have a right to be negative about this.
Well, and absolutely. And I love, because I do that same thing. And I think people think I'm nuts. Like, and I think,
yeah.
Like, listen, I've had a lot of grief in my life and I don't know what it is, but there's joy that comes out of me. And I think it comes across as like, I'm irreverent. But my son Will was just like that too. Like, people would be fighting and he would like look and he'd go, whatever.
Right.
Because it's like, what it does is it disrupts. Like, I know that this is a clever placement of your humor, because what you're looking is to disrupt and pivot on those places where emotions are very high. And right. I think that people initially may be offended, but then realizing that there is a purpose behind that disruption.
Right. And again, it's like, I guess my thing is like, you want to celebrate the times you screw up. And, you really do, because if you don't, you're probably going to take it way too seriously, in the sense that, everything I was just talking about with pragmatism and moving and making sure that you analyze the situation and move. That's all essential when you're in a point of leadership and you don't have a chance to spin your tires. You got to move as fast as you can. Mm-hmm. The reality is, though, we're all human beings making mistakes. You have to learn. You have to be able to reflect on your issues. You have to be able to look at what you're doing differently. And I realize this with all that I do, in the sense that it's amazing how many times you can do something, or you can be a huge success in one aspect of your life, and then you can go over to something else and be really humbling, like, oh my gosh, the way I just ran that interview process really just did not make sense. I screwed that up.
Yeah, right.
The ability to be humble about understanding your ignorance is key, in my opinion, because when you go through a tough stretch in life, or whatever challenges that you're faced, it's not about writing them off. I think that's, there's the old David Goggins has this great one. It's like, motivation is garbage. Motivation.
Yeah, I know. I love him too.
And you got to just be able to go out there and do stuff without motivation. Motivation doesn't get you there.
It only gets you motivation, first oomph, and then you get something else that's to take over, for sure.
Right. And the reason motivation doesn't work at the end of the day is because your ability to solve problems in the mindset, in the short term, on a fringe, you're not thinking. You're in a flow state. You're moving. You're making decisions as you go. It's impossible to equate some kind of emotion to it, some kind of motivation or inspiration. At the end of the day, you're following a plan and you're following your trajectory. You have to understand that there's going to be bumps in the road. Yes. And bumps in the road today look like car crashes. They look like horrific moments. I mean, imagine being the CEO of a company facing absolute catastrophe times right now. Yes. The reality is, they are in that position for that reason. There's a reason somebody is in the position that they're in today to face the challenges of tomorrow.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I'm going to pivot, because I have asked you a couple questions, because a lot of the themes that we're talking about are is actually part of the research that I'm doing for the final chapter of my book, Claim Your Inner Warrior, which is a book geared towards men and self-care and embracing their inner warrior.
Love that.
So many of the themes that you're talking about are very much what is the warrior, which is staying calm under, being the protector, or what are the things that are under your obligation and care, making pragmatic decisions, being able to pivot, having the responsibility, having to be able to have real conversations, bringing lightness, managing, leading. These are all thematics of the warrior. So what for you is, what would you like to say to young men or young people in regards to what it means to be a warrior now during this time?
Perfect. Well, I love this one story from Marcus Aurelius, who was I believe he was the emperor of the Roman Empire for a time. And he's got some awesome books and just some meditations of his that have survived all these years. One thing he talks about is 100 men in battle. And if I don't butcher everything about it, it really has a lot of relevance about the warrior. So he talks about how 100 men go off to battle. 80 of those 100 men are just targets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're there to just be targets. 10 of them, they're not even supposed to be in the battle. Probably before the battle starts, they're going to run off. They're not going to be a part of it. The second things get bad, they're going to be bailing, whatever it is. So you have about 90% of people are either in the wrong spot, in the wrong place, or they're just drifting through. They're just mediocrity, just moving through.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing the motions that they have to do. At least that's how kind of I interpret that, those first 90%. Then you have the 9 out of those 100. These are the soldiers. At the end of the day, these are the ones who make the battle. You know, it's like everybody is so thankful to have these on the battlefield. These would be like the Navy SEALs. These are the people who are driving the battle. They are the ones they're out there just absolutely carrying people in their backpack. Then there's the one who's the warrior. This is the person who is by far and above the most experienced, this is the person everyone turns to. And when I say experience, it's not age. I mean, Alexander the Great was, I think he was 18 or 19 years old when he ascended to the head of the empire that he ended up spread to India and all these crazy things, right? Yeah. So the reality is the warrior has nothing to do with experience and the level of age. What it does, and this is a message to anybody who's young, Robert Greene talks about this in his book, Mastery. It takes 10,000 hours to really master what it is that you're getting into, whatever your skill, your trade, or your career. It takes 10,000 hours to really become a master. And he breaks down a great process that I'm not going to go into how to get there. But the point of it is the warrior, if he went up against 9 of the soldiers from the other army all at once, he's probably not going to come out of that equation in one piece. That being said, the warrior's presence on the battlefield makes the battle. If that warrior is gone, is he killed, or if he flees the battle, he or she flees the battle, it's lost. You can't make it despite having 99 other people doing obligations. So when I look at the warrior is somebody who has not only been battle tested, but is ready for the next battle. And what it is it's being a mentor. It's looking at what your people plan is. How are you going to help people in turbulent times? Because eventually those people are going to serve you later on in greater ways you could ever imagine. And also on your own front, what are the challenges that you're facing today that you've been prepared for to now make a change as you're going forward? So I really love that story from Marcus Aurelius because it really boils it down to the reality is if you take that and kind of apply it to like 100 college students, 10 are probably going to drop out. 80 are probably just going to go through the motions. They'll get jobs. They'll have 401ks. Not that anything's wrong with that, but it might not be their decision. They're probably just going through the motions. 9 out of 100 are probably going to be your top salespeople, your movers and shakers, your COOs, all those guys. And then there's the 1 out of 100 that'll be the Steve Jobs. It's going to be the person who really is going to bring the most change and the most instrumental actions. But it's also a long-term game. That person could be there by 28 or could be there by 58 or maybe by 88. Doesn't matter, especially in today's economy. Especially in today's economy.
So I guess it's like right now, viewers and listeners, choose to be a warrior. Because we need warriors right now. And whatever, and whatever frame out it is, it's like the warrior, just like you were describing. It's the one that's prepared, that has a strategy that people lean on because they're trustworthy, because they've done their self-work. They understand who they are. Because, we can say we're going to check out emotion. Warriors know who they are.
Yes.
They know who they are. And I think that's certainly about you, Aaron, is that you know who you are at a level. And I think that's why you can laugh in adversity.
And, the warriors also know who they aren't, right? They know who to surround themselves with and who they need. And you asked me how I'm so positive on stuff, right? And I think it also comes down to, at the end of the day, when you are looking at a situation, you're choosing to be positive or negative or anything that comes out of anything. At the end of the day, it comes down to what kind of confidence do you have in yourself to be able to solve a problem, to be able to guide yourself through the storm. I said this in the book. If you don't have confidence in yourself, no one else is going to have it for you. And that's a commonly used term, right? If you do not have the confidence in yourself to be able to survive and thrive, even in the worst of times, you are not going to be able to survive or thrive in those times. And you'll end up underperforming your ability to serve your family, your loved ones, your friends, and the people who are important to you. That's what's so important about the mindset of the warrior versus the fear of, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? I have to make a move out of I have the opportunity to make this move now, even if it comes in challenging and turbulent times.
Right. And how to move through that with, a level of stillness and awareness and confidence. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and a positive outcome. We need people like you, Aaron. So is there anything, we're just winding up now, we've gone over a little bit, which would definitely have to do part 2. Is there anything that you'd like to conclude in this conversation, or to share any major tidbits with the audience?
You know what? I've talked to my father a few times, so why not one more thing from him? He always used to tell me what his father, my grandfather, used to say: you're a product of your own environment. So what's phenomenal about an opportunity like right now, it really gives us a chance to audit our own environment. One thing that I found is that social media, so I'm at the gym the other day and I'm looking at the news programs, and like the world is about to end. And it's like, maybe not that I ever watch the news, but maybe you shouldn't be watching the news about right now. Maybe you need to audit yourself and some of the things and some of the ways that you're practicing and using your time. But that's a very micro issue. What if we look at just who you're spending time with? There's the old quote that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, or show me your friends, I'll show you your future. It's a great opportunity right now to audit the environment you're in. And at the end of the day, the environment you're in is not the responsibility of the people you share with. It's yours. You are the reason you're in the positions that you are in, and you built your way to there, whether you've stumbled in there or you feel like you stumbled in there, or you've worked your butt off to get into that position.
Right.
You have to recognize that you are going to be a product of the environment that you put yourself into. This and dramatic times like this provide a phenomenal opportunity to be able to build up a brand new environment. If you are not satisfied with what you have in front of you, there's no greater time to reach out and to try to find a better placement in the economy right now, because there's so many new companies that will come out of this. And there's so many companies at the end of the day where, look, they're going to be forcing people to find new avenues, because we just talked about my home radio station. They realized they don't need a big corporate office to run a radio station in 2020. People are going to get laid off. It's a result of horrible times, like the coronavirus, has no impact on you. Audit your environment. Don't audit your decisions that somehow led you to being a victim of this crazy thing that happened, because at the end of the day, you're not a victim. We're all subject to our own circumstances and our own decisions. Look at your environment. What can you adjust? What can you bring in that's really going to fire you up and put you in a position where 10 years from now, you're going to be looking back and really satisfied with the challenge and the work that went into these years. But the relationships that you came out of it with were so valuable, and it's the reason you get to where you're at. So I think that'd be the biggest message I'd have. Don't be afraid to get after it in that sense.
Right.
And you can join us on our podcast, the one I do, which is it's short episodes that are positive and fun, and it brings energy to people's days. People love the fact that we put out 3 to 6 minute episodes, because they can listen to it on their morning walk, their drive.
Short and sweet.
More energy and optimism, less negativity and fear.
Right, exactly. And meanwhile, we're talking about real things. So even in the greatest tragedy is hope, right? If we choose to infuse it. And I just, Aaron, thank you so much. This was amazing. I'm wicked appreciative. And I will be sharing all of your notes in the summary in the interview on the podcast. And thank you so much. And thank you, viewers, for being a part of our wonderful talk. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Thanks so much, Kate. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.